There's lots more to working in Revit than just building a model. But before we leave modeling behind, there's a few more modeling tools that I'd like to at least draw your attention to. So I've got a slightly more refined example of our restaurant model right here that already has some of the modeling tools in it that I'd like to focus on. So you'll notice that there are these glazed elements along the front of the building. There's some roof elements here. And inside the building, there's more elements that we'll see in a few moments. So why don't we start with the roof element right here? I'm going to go ahead and select this. And of course, as you can see, we can make it slope at any angle that we need. Now, with that selected, it's semi-transparent, so you can actually see right through the roof right now and kind of see some of the geometry down below. But over here on the properties palette, you will have several options that you can configure, and one of them is that slope. So right now it's at a 4 and 12 slope, which means that for every 12 inches of run, it rises up 4 inches. Now I could change that by putting in a different value like 6, and that will make the roof steeper, and notice that the walls that attach to it will follow along as well. Or I could make it shallower by putting in 2, and that would be 2 and 12. Now, of course, that creates a little bit of a problem right there. So why don't I go back to the original 4 and 12 and kind of reset it back the way it was. Now, what this is referred to is a sketch-based object. Now, what that means exactly is to create the shape of the roof, you go into a mode that Revit calls sketch mode, and you just sort of draw it out in a two-dimensional way. So to illustrate that, I'm actually going to put a small canopy over the entryway right here. So I'm going to go to the level 1 floor plan, roll my wheel to kind of zoom in a little bit here, and let's just build a really quick roof in this location. So I'm going to go to the Architecture tab, and the roof button is right here, Roof by Footprint, but if you click the drop down, just make sure you're picking that first item off the list there. That will gray out the view window and put you in a sketch mode. And if you look over here on the draw panel, there are several different shapes that you can draw. I'll just stick with this simple rectangular shape right here. And I'm going to start anywhere on the exterior face of this wall and just sort of draw out a little roughly shaped rectangle here. Now, I'm not really too concerned with exactly how big it is, so I'm just going to kind of let it snap to whole numbers there. And then I'm going to come over here and click the Modify tool to finish. Now, notice that we get this rectangular shape, and at the moment here, if I were to finish, I would get a totally flat roof. And the reason for that is I haven't actually indicated that I want anything to slope here. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to select just the 2 horizontal lines. And the easiest way to do that is to start here in empty space, click and drag to the left a little bit with a crossing window, and then select those 2 horizontal edges. Once I have those 2 edges selected, I'll come up here to the options bar and check this toggle that defines slope. And you'll see a small triangle appear on each of those lines. That's how we know that these are now slope defining edges. Now over here on the properties palette, the slope defaults to this very strange number here, but it's a little bit steep. It's nearly 7 and 12. So what I'm going to do is change that to 4 to drop it back down to the same slope as the roof that we had elsewhere in the building. And then I'll just sort of click away from it to deselect. Now I'm going to use this green checkbox right here on the ribbon to finish this edit mode. And when I do, that will finish creating the roof. And then I'll click back here on my 3D view tab to see the result. Now, as you can see, my roof is sitting down on the floor, but that's easily remedied. I can just simply select it here and notice that the base level, instead of level 1, I could change that to level 2, and that will move it up above the doorway and make a nice little canopy right there. So I'll just sort of click away from it to deselect. Now, let's direct our attention next to some of this glazing here. If you move your mouse near this glazed wall, depending on where your mouse is, it might highlight the vertical elements or some dashed lines or even the panels potentially. So there's a whole lot going on here. What you want to do is make sure you're getting this dashed box that goes all the way around it. Now, if you're having any difficulty doing that, use your tab key. Each time you press your tab key, it will highlight something different. And you can see that there's quite a bit of geometry here, but eventually you should be able to get around and get it to highlight the entire dashed element. And then when you click, what you're going to see is that is something called a curtain wall, and the type is called storefront. So let's see how that behaves. I'm going to go back to my level 1 floor plan, And right here, I have these two walls. So I'm going to select one, hold the control key down, and select the other. It turns out that a curtain wall is just another wall family, which means that you can take these two existing walls, which are generic 5-inch basic walls right now, open up the type selector, scroll down, locate that storefront type, which is part of the curtain wall family, choose that, and it will change those two walls into curtain walls. And that's all there is to creating that glazed wall system. So another way that you can use that, I'll just hold my wheel down and pan over to this front portion of the building, is to actually embed it right in another wall like these out here that we were highlighting on the exterior. To do that, we go to the wall command, open up our type selector, scroll down and locate that same curtain wall storefront. And if you draw it right on top of another wall, it will embed itself right in that wall and cut a hole, almost like it was a window. Now, in this case, my glass is pointing the wrong way. Well, there's a little flip control right there, and I can easily flip it in the other direction. Now I'm going to click the Modify tool to cancel, go back to my 3D view, pan over slightly, and you'll see that this curtain wall is sitting right on the floor where this other one kind of is offset off the ground a little. Well, that's easily controlled with this base offset right here. I'll set that to 2 feet. And now this guy matches this guy. So that's how that glazed wall system was created. Now, if we go back to our level 1 floor plan one more time and consider another part of the plan, notice here I have a stair element, and that stair element has railings. So there's all sorts of other kinds of objects that you can create in your Revit projects. Now that stair leads up to a level 2. So if I open up the level 2 floor plan, here's the stair coming up to this location, and I've got a balcony out here. Now I'm having a hard time selecting the balcony. It's selecting the guardrail right now. So I'll use my tab key to highlight the edge of that balcony and click, and notice that that is a floor element. Now the floor element is almost identical to the roof. If I click Edit Boundary, do you see how I get the same purple lines? The difference is none of these have that little triangle on them, which indicates that this is a completely flat floor element. So if you have none of the edges with slope assigned, it will be flat. And if you turn on that slope defining edge, then it starts to slope it. But otherwise, floors and roofs are very similar to one another. I'm going to click this red X to cancel out of there without making any changes. So you're welcome to explore further in this model. And if you want to learn more about any of the tools that I've briefly shown you here, we cover each of these in detail in Revit Essential Training.